grandmother has always told me stories about the parrot and how when she was young, she was born in 1909, her brothers, one specifically, Neko, who works in Yunque, brought home a parrot to Naranjito, which is where they're from. And they basically had this parrot as a pet. But back then they were in abundance.
Mi compañero, una especie endémica de Puerto Rico, la cual son muy pocas las personas que tienen la oportunidad de verla porque solamente la hay en el bosque de Luquillo, en el Yunque.
Realmente la gente no está muy consciente de lo que está pasando con su cotorra, ¿entiende? No sabe que realmente es una ave que está en peligro de extinción y no tienen conciencia de lo que está pasando.
And obviously you hear that there's less and less of the green parrots available, and so many trips that people go to El Yunque, the rainforest, looking for the green parrot. Well, I've been here, it'll be 16 years this November, but I've yet to meet anybody who's actually encountered one there.
Por ejemplo, mi papá, mis abuelos, pues las vieron en este bosque. Ya las personas de mi edad que estamos aquí, no, difícil de verlas a menos que no sea en cautiverio.
Somebody was saying, oh, it's just not a sturdy enough species. If it goes extinct, that's too bad. And I thought, well, you could say that about a lot of species if you want to be that way about it,
People may think, well, the Puerto Rican parrot is going through, the Darwin survival of the species, is not able to compete against some more aggressive or, resilient animals, birds, and cannot compete with the changing of this, the makeup of what now is becoming Puerto Rico. And I draw a parallel line between that and what happens to Puerto Ricans at large.
If you ask the average Puerto Rican about the Puerto Rican parrot, they will say, oh yeah, we should protect it, or we love it. But if you ask any specific details, probably they know little about it.
Tú sabes, no hay mucha información, la gente no está bien informada al respecto, la gente confunde los pájaros, muchas veces llaman diciendo hay una cotorra y esto, y no es una cotorra.
I used to have this argument. I mean, I haven't talked about it lately, but I'd talk to people and I'd be like, oh, I was up in El Yunque at the aviary where they're breeding, Puerto Rican parrot because there's so few of them. And they'd say, oh, no, there are a bunch of them that live right down the street from me. Oh, no, there are a bunch right in Vega Baja. And these are like really educated people. I remember one of them is a woman who's an artist who's very sophisticated. They're saying, Rosa, but those aren't Puerto Rican parrots. They may be resident in Puerto Rico, but they're not this particular species. I mean, it's documented. They study them. They know the only communities are in these two locations. Oh, no, they're definitely Puerto Rican parrots. And so there's this funny misconception that, I mean, if Rosa, if this particular woman had this misconception, then it must run across a lot of other strata of society that people think, oh, I see a green parrot, it must be a Puerto Rican parrot.
Most people don't have a real good picture of the Puerto Rican parrot, so let's go. First is they are green, but in the top third of the body, each feather has a black edging. This is not obvious from the distance, but when you see them close up, you see that every feather from the top of the head to half the chest has a black edging. The flight feathers are turquoise. The red blaze is really thin. It's not big like in other species, but usually thicker in males, up to a centimeter wide, and thinner in females, and sometimes it can form corals and crowns and filigrees.
The main reason for these parrot to be endangered is the loss of habitat. 99% of Puerto Rico's original forest was cut down for many purposes, such as agriculture, production of charcoal, production of precious woods, industrialization, construction of housing, etc. So throughout the years, many species lose their habitats, such as the Puerto Rican parrot. Puerto Rican Amazon is one of the 10 most endangered birds in the world. The lowest number ever reached was 13 birds back in 1975. The Fish and Wildlife Service, the World Wildlife Fund, the Department of Natural Resources, and the Forest Service, they just come together and start recovery efforts for the species. So they start a captive program to produce individuals to be released into the wild.
We have to remember that this is an animal that existed in huge number, and I mean there were millions of them.
The program started with the 6 birds, 3 pairs. That's how far behind we were when we started. There weren't much knowledge about breeding Amazons in captivity. They had to breed birds that were captured from the wild, and it was a very, very difficult and challenging environment. To start working with such a small number of birds, it's really a heroic act, and those people deserve the credit.
Right now, the wild flock is estimated around 30 to 34 birds, without counting this year fledglings, and between both aviaries we have over 175 birds in captivity, plus we have been able to release 40 birds into the wild during the last 4 years. That means over 200 birds in less than 30 years. Back in 1993, several pairs from this aviary were moved into the new facilities at Rio Abajo, and they have been breeding birds there since then.
It was decided to bring a group of birds here to protect the species from any catastrophe that could destroy the Luquillo aviary. It could be a hurricane or sickness or a landslide, just to preserve the species. So if something happened to one of the aviaries, the other will be spared.
Back in 1989, Hurricane Hugo reduced the wild population by 50%. And that was only a Category 4. If we had a Category 5 that was a direct hit, it could, potentially it could eliminate the entire wild population. So that's why we're trying so hard to reestablish a second wild population in another part of the island, to not literally have all your eggs in one basket.